Cool. So, hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you are. My name's Joe. I am a solutions consultant for Blueshift. Apologies if you were expecting my colleague Mike. He's actually on vacation today. We didn't update the image in time, so you get me instead. But don't worry, I'm here to take you through how Blueshift can help you solve your business challenges, how we can make your marketing much smarter, much more omnichannel, and orchestrate across those different channels as well. What I will draw your attention to initially, if you haven't experienced Blueshift before, is obviously our website and the definition around what a Smart Hub CDP really means. We like to think that this isn't something that's just a buzzword. It's actually something that Gartner coined, and we are within the Smart Hub CDP category. In the sense of the CDP part, which we identify as being the part that you unify and you can segment your data in. We look at the ability to orchestrate and activate as well. So we are a hub, so we're not going to limit you from operating across different channels. And also, of course, we do the smart part as well, right? So we have built-in artificial intelligence that is customizable, completely transparent, and we don't have to rely on third parties to do that as well. So very much able to look at each of these different aspects as we go through the platform. And what we will do is please feel free to add any questions in the chat box as we go. And yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. So without further ado, let's take a look at the different aspects of the Blueshift platform through our kind of demo site. And essentially this is a fictional brand, absolutely no relation to the real one. Blue Lemon. So we're an activewear brand. We may have a website, and this is essentially an example way of the way that a customer can integrate their data sources with us, right? So this is through a Shopify integration. We also have an integration with Magento, and there are a number of different ways that you can get data into Blueshift, and mostly those can be events. So that's behaviors on the site, or within a mobile app, for example. So we have a JavaScript tag which you put on the site. We also have a mobile SDK. So all of those events and those behaviors that customers exhibit on site can be tracked. So that could include elements such as browsing particular categories or adding particular items to my cart, for example. And all of those different elements of that event tracking that can be fed into Blueshift, and that gives us the ability to orchestrate based on that behavior. Now, critically, what we also have the concept of is a catalog, and a catalog is essentially the inventory of your website, right? So it could be products, it could be blog articles, it could be anything that you kind of have as an item that you want to track as part of a catalog. And that gives you that unique ability to actually look at, okay, what have I done from an events perspective? So what have those customers done in terms of interacting with that content? And also what pieces of content have they shown an affinity towards, or have they particularly shown an interest in, right? So we can make a few assumptions about their implicit actions, but also we can make some kind of assumptions about what we can predict they might want to receive in future. So now that we've got all of that data flowing into Blueshift, let's take a look into the Blueshift platform itself. So for an example customer profile, we might have my colleague Stan, for example, might have been browsing the website. He may have looked at certain items in the site, and what we do is we kind of condense all of that key information into one view. This is what we call our customer interaction graph. Now, this single customer view, or customer 360 as we like to call it, this is available for all customers that you have within Blueshift. We will track both unknown and known users. So essentially, once we have that identifying event, so we can kind of assign an email address or a mobile device ID, we can stitch that together, right? So we can say, okay, we saw what a customer's doing before they became a customer and we identified them, and also afterwards. So we can see what their purchase journey was, and also all of the research they did in the run up to that. So that gives you that much broader 360 view. With a customer profile, we see a lot of key information that you would expect to see, right? So things like the information we keep on a customer. So things like their email address, their phone number, their customer ID, which could be something unique to your business. It could be a CRM identifier, for example. Then we'll be able to see a cross-channel preference. So looking at email, push, in-app, or SMS, so whether they're subscribed to any of those different channels. And then critically, we will give you the ability to create an unlimited number of custom attributes. So compare that to other platforms which may put a limit on the number of attributes they can use, or the number of attributes can be used in segmentation. There's no such limit with Blueshift. So all of these attributes could be sourced from different places, right? So we can have looks at identify kind of the total amount spent. We can pull in information about their address information. We can look at different unique IDs that we might want to pull in. Similarly, these might be custom attributes external to Blueshift, right? So they might be propensity scores that you have calculated outside of Blueshift. They might be any other attributes that you might want to feed in and actually use within Blueshift. Now, critically, when you have an attribute and it's in Blueshift, it's available for use pretty much instantaneously. So you can use it within segmentation, you can use it within recommendations, you can use it within predictive content, and we'll come on to see how that can be used in a second. In the center column, we can look at some of the aggregate information we can track. So things like total revenue, for example, per customer, total number of orders, total number of visits. If you have a custom attribute that you wanted to track specifically, it might be the number of times somebody added to their wish list, for example. That could be tracked at an aggregate level, and we can calculate that over the lifetime for the customer. Similarly, in location, we will look at the last tracked event. So if there's an IP address associated with that event, we'll narrow down on that location. So the last detected location, for example. And again, that's usable and accessible within segmentation. So you can use that as part of your segments, which we'll come on to see. Critically, we can also surface key segments that this customer exists in. So we know that Stan may have purchased in the last week, for example. We have a segment called customers that purchased in the past week, nice and easy. That exists in real time. So every segment within Blueshift is dynamic, it exists in real time if it's part of an activity. And that means that a segment can be created, it can be defined, and once people meet the criteria of that segment, so they can fall in or they'll fall out of that segment in real time. We'll come on to see how that can be actioned in a second. Finally, at the bottom, we also have information about predictive scores and predictive affinities. Now, predictive affinities, those are out of the box, they're built into the platform. And essentially, once we start to see a certain number of events on a customer, say 6 to 8 different events, we will start to assume or imply the particular categories here. So it's, in terms of hour, we're looking at the hour that they're most likely to engage with us. So based on all the communications we're sending to them, which hour of the day are they most likely to engage. That might be that we've seen activity on the site. It might be that we've seen activity in email, for example. We can actually derive that from that activity. Category is going to be the information that we see based on the catalog. So based on that taxonomy, that categorization of your website, which categories has that customer been most active in? So we can actually start to infer, okay, they've been looking at joggers, they've been looking at shorts, for example. We might be able to predict what content or what products to push to them next. Finally, a messaging channel, we're going to be able to see, okay, which channels have they engaged in most. So across all of the campaigns that they might have been sent. So again, we have a campaign view, so to give you a kind of 360 view of all the campaigns that have been sent to this customer, which campaigns have been engaged with most. And again, we're going to assume that we know the messaging channel that's most likely to get that customer to engage. So again, we're applying that machine learning and that AI algorithm in the background to actually infer that information and give it to you and make it available within Blueshift for segmentation and predictive content. Finally, we also have the concept of predictive scores. Now, this is an extra feature within Blueshift, which enables you to have customizable, transparent AI that works for your business, right? So these aren't generic definitions of what email engagement is or what purchase events might be or what churn might be for you. These are customized to your specific business needs. So we'll take the events that you want as a goal. So it could be any event that we track within Blueshift. And we can apply a number of funnel events. We can add certain elements of kind of different attributes and weight them differently. And then that score would be applied across all different aspects of the customers within your database. I'm just checking the chat message. So Ryan asks, in this view here, right here, are you tracking the purchase journey? So not quite. We're tracking the overall picture of what the customer's done. Obviously, you can make some inferences about that, right? So you can say that the customer's viewed a particular product and then they add it to cart. And then there might be a purchase event that we track as well. So we can certainly see if they do that. What I would say is that's better viewed in the activity window. and we can actually see all of the different events that have been tracked for this customer. We can see that they maybe added to cart or they removed a certain item from cart. And again, the flexibility of Blueshift means that any of those events can actually trigger a campaign or an activity of campaigns off the back of it, right? So if they had a number of removed from cart events, we could actually say, okay, what do we know about how that customer is interacting with that product? We could potentially target them with a follow-up that maybe adds a discount or something like that, right? Good question. Keep them up. So that's the overview of a customer. So we know what a customer's doing, and we have that for every customer within our database. So now we've got that data flowing into Blueshift, and we've started to collate that information in one place. We obviously want to start to create segments and maybe act on that data, right? So what we could have is a very simple segment. Now, don't let the simplicity term kind of belie the power of this part of the platform. So this is our segmentation editor. And what you can do is essentially on the right-hand side, you'll be able to define the elements of your segment. So at the moment, we've only got event is view within the past 15 days. What I might have is a further element of recent activity. So I might say purchase within the past. And then something to note here is obviously the time windows. We can actually do a fixed, moving, or past amount of time. A lot of other platforms can't handle the kind of time filtering that we do. So we can look at past 10 days, right? So they viewed in the last 15, but they purchased within the last 10, and we might add that to our segment. I can very quickly hit the refresh button, and I should have really checked this beforehand. I don't know if the demo environment's going to give me a thing. Oh, it does. Okay, good. So we have 1,700 people, right? So we've got a very defined segment of how many people were purchased in the last week. What we have the further ability to do is add any of these different segment filters on the left-hand side, and that's where some of the power comes from what we can track, right? So recent activity is going to look at the last 30 days. Lifetime is what you'd expect, and that's the lifetime activity. So those are elements like revenue, orders, visits, that kind of thing that we track in the lifetime variables. Demographics going to give you the male female information, but also location, so based on either the recently tracked location or proximity. So if you're sending us information about cities and you have that on the user profile, you can do targeting down to a certain proximity of a particular location. Those predictive scores that I mentioned, those are customizable to your business. So we might want to say, okay, for customers that have purchased in the past week, we might want to add a predictive score of, okay, how likely are they to purchase again? And that purchase definition of that predictive score might look at kind of how likely they are to do that purchase event in the next 7 days, for example. And that will further refine that segment and give me that ability to drill down further. User affinity, we'll start to look at things like the categories, hours, and messaging channels that we saw in the predictive affinities category. Traffic source enables us to bring in any of the UTM information if you're sending it to us, so campaigns, content, any of the UTM kind of parameters. And then user attributes means that any of those custom attributes that you create, they can all be used within segmentation as well, so they can all be part of that particular segment. Customer lists gives you the ability to upload flat files as well. So you can have lists within a segment. With our advanced segments, you can have segments within segments, and you can have a view of different elements of the number of subscribers at each level of that advanced kind of segment. And my favorite part is actually messaging, and that's going to give you the ability to actually say, okay, this segment exists, but I want to restrict it to only people that have done a certain action on a certain campaign I've already sent, for example. So it might be only people that have opened all my campaigns in a certain time period, or it could be a particular campaign or a particular message within a campaign. So again, it can get very, very powerful and very granular very quickly. Any questions as we go, please don't hesitate to fill out the chat. So that's essentially segmentation. And remember what I said about segments, they exist in real time. So that means that when that segment's created and it's a part of an activity like a campaign or a syndication, that segment continuously updates. It's continuously in real time. So when people meet the criteria of this segment, they will fall in or they will fall out of it accordingly. That means that it's quite powerful, right? So with syndications, which is our tool to kind of create segments and export them, we can do pretty cool things with the actual segment itself. So we can actually create a syndication to syndicate to Facebook, for example. We have native integrations for Facebook custom audiences for Google AdWords and for Criteo. We also have a relationship with LiveRamp, so that segment can be syndicated to other platforms such as Twitter, LinkedIn, and other ones that are part of the LiveRamp distribution API. We're continuously adding to these, so if you have one that's not listed, don't worry, it's probably on the list anyway. But one thing to be aware of, that the LiveRamp integration is currently for the US only, so any of you that are international like me, you can't actually get the LiveRamp part yet, but obviously if you have a pressing business case, please let us know. So with our segment, we might want to say, let's take a look at existing customers or customers that have purchased in the last week, like we were looking at. And say, for example, I wanted to optimize my ad spend on Facebook. What I could do is make sure that I'm not sending targeted messages to people that are already customers, right? Or people that have purchased already, and we don't want to keep barraging them with adverts. I can select my Facebook integration, add it to my Facebook account, which we've set up in account settings, and then I'll sync it to a custom audience. So I may have an existing high value customers, for example, as a custom audience, and I could also have this executed continuously, right? So I've got a real-time segment that's constantly updating my Facebook custom audience. So I've currently got a live connection to Facebook to say, okay, let's make sure we don't target existing customers. Typically, our match rate's 60% and above for Facebook custom audiences, and a lot of our customers have optimized their ad spend significantly with this feature. So now I've got my segments, I've got my syndication set up in the background. Let's maybe create a campaign off the back of that, right? So campaigns exist in a number of different ways within Blueshift. You can have segment trigger campaigns. This is what we're going to look at in a second. So triggering a campaign off of the segment we created. You can have event trigger campaigns. So any of those events that we're tracking can be fed into Blueshift, and we can trigger an event based campaign flow from that. You can have simply recurring campaigns, the ones that constantly go out on a regular basis, or one-off sends. Or we also have a feature called live content, which means that you can actually publish live areas of content to your own website. So if you take a look at a company called Tradera in Sweden, so tradera.se, they actually run all of their recommendations content off of Blueshift. So let's take a look at a campaign. Here we've got a pretty complex example of a segment trigger campaign, but it gives you a feel for how we can orchestrate across those different channels. Now we've got our segment we saw earlier, so customers that purchased within the last week, and that's the definition of our segment. So I've cloned this post-purchase upsell just to give you guys an example of it. So when I hit save or launch, this activity will happen. So when people fall into that segment, they will start this flow off, and essentially a campaign flow in Blueshift will evaluate from top to bottom and then left to right. So the first element in our top to bottom is this one, which is upsell, cross-sell email. So we're testing the subject line. We're doing a quick A/B test. So quick A/B test, slightly different language. We might put in personalization, for example. We could do that very easily. Similarly, in the actual content, what we've got is our post-purchase, but we've actually included what we call recommendations content. So this is recommending certain products, and you'll notice that they seem very familiar. Those are actually the products that maybe I was looking at on the website. So what we've done is we've created a recommendation based off of those particular products that that person was looking at, and we're providing the ability to target that information within the content. Now, recommendation schemas can actually exist across channels within Blueshift, so it's not just restricted to email. As you can see, as we go down, we've got a push message and an in-app message, and we're leveraging that same recommendation schema to publish the same recommendation to those different channels as well. One thing I'll note about how do we make this smarter, right? So essentially these campaign activities across channels, they have a very similar format. So each of these trigger windows will have the same rough format. So essentially this is an SMS one. If we dive into it, we can see all of the different things that we can do within a campaign trigger. That includes having a wait condition, making sure we look at engagement. So we can say, make sure that people haven't viewed that previous message, get this one. And then we can add further criteria. Now, if we remember the segmentation editor, what we've got here is the ability to add any of those different segment filters again. So again, it's incredibly powerful. If you start with a really broad segment, you can actually get very granular within the individual messages within a campaign as well. So in this example, we've got the email going out at the top, and then further down, we've got an SMS message going out saying, okay, let's make sure we do high SMS engagement, right? So we're using our predictive scores to say only send this email to people that have a high likelihood of engaging with SMS. So we're further optimizing, we're further making that campaign smart, right? And then we're sending a particular SMS message. Now, again, as I mentioned, these evaluate top to bottom and left to right. So essentially what we would do is evaluate the conditions of this message. And if the person doesn't meet them, they will fall into this one, right? So if they haven't got a high engagement percentage with SMS, we'll fall into this next message, which is a push message. Again, this is all native, so this is bidirectional information feeding back into Blueshift. We have a high push engagement prediction. So again, we're looking at people that are likely to engage with push, and we'll send them a push. But if they're not going to meet that criteria either, then the default is we will send them this one, which is again looking at a predictive score of in-app engagement. Similarly, if I wanted to add any further orchestration to this campaign, I can add a trigger really easily. This will give me the ability to do email, push, in-app, and SMS. I believe this may be slightly broken. So there is another part of the platform which enables me to kind of do cloud apps and other different integrations that we have. I will encourage you to look at help.blueshift.com, and that will give you an idea of all the different features and functionality that we have within Blueshift. One of which is of interest to you guys would be our cloud app channel. So essentially what we can do as part of a campaign activity within the overall campaign orchestration, we can create a further kind of send out to an external platform. If that platform has a REST-based API and accepts a JSON payload, we can essentially orchestrate to that platform. So essentially, we have pre-built integrations for the likes of Zendesk, Salesforce, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, but we also give you the ability to create a connection to that other platform that you may have, which may be custom to your business. So hopefully you can see the power of the data management and the segmentation and how we can orchestrate those campaigns across channels. Obviously, within Blueshift, you want to be able to see what's going on after that point. So we have the ability to create custom reports. We have a number of reports straight out of the box. A lot of these are here, as you can see in front of you. But what we can do with all of these reports is actually edit them on the fly. So we can actually look at, okay, we're looking at a click to open rate metric at the moment. I maybe want to change that to just clicks. And I can select it to group by template. So we're just looking at the number of clicks instead. The metrics itself can be customized based on the number of different metrics within that you would expect to see, right? So things like opens, clicks, unsubscribed, and that kind of thing. We can bring in custom goals. So if you have events that are tracked that you want to pull into Blueshift, you can actually have those within reports as well. And you can create compound metrics. So those are available to create based on a combination of either of these core or custom goals, or one or two core metrics, for example. That gives you the ability to obviously edit these campaign reports on the fly. You can group them by template. You can group it by segment, so you can see how the data is performing rather than the template themselves. You can also add certain filters to the reports themselves, so you can actually say, okay, let's kind of do it by a particular campaign, and obviously you can get further customized within that. Finally, what you'll be able to do is also create a dashboard of reports. So each of those individual reports we saw, those can be combined into a single dashboard, and you can add notes and make sure that this is kind of the high level view that you want. Obviously, you can do sends by particular channel, so it starts to get that kind of cross-channel view of everything that's going on within your Blueshift account. Furthermore, we also have the ability to see any of the data that you've seen today can be pushed to an S3 folder. So if you have an existing BI tool or any kind of analytics reporting that you do external, that can very easily be connected to via Blueshift. Finally, I'll finish on the ability to kind of see pretty much everything that's going on. We're fairly transparent in how we do things. So if you head to help.blueshift.com, you'll be able to see a lot of all of the information you saw today, how we do things, how you set things up. You don't need to log in or have a password to get into that, so it's all available. I'll point you towards blueshift.com, particularly under the product update section. That's where you'll get a feel for some of our recent monthly releases. That gives you an indication of the kind of great innovations we've brought to market in the last few months. And of course, what I would encourage you to do is go to the events page, check out the events that we have on, I think, Monday. We have a review of our kind of upcoming changes to the user interface. So that's going to give you much more information about our kind of updates to the Creative Studio. So with that, I'll ask you if there's any further questions. Please feel free to put them into the chat. If not, I shall wish you a very good evening. Thank you for your attendance, and yeah, Merry Christmas.